Gold Shields brings true stories from law enforcement, the military, true crime authors, and first responders. Experience the dedication, danger, and emotional toll with the heroes themselves. These gripping tales of true crimes, true stories, and true heroes are all here on Gold Shields.
Hey, welcome back to Gold Shields. This is Dan Murphy along with my partner in crime, Tom Smith. We're thrilled to be with you today with a guest that we're blown away that we have. Just an amazing individual. Can't wait for you to talk to him. But first, as always, want to give a couple of shout outs to some people who we want to thank. First is Impact Solutions. Impact Solutions is the new alternative to pepper spray. It's a revolutionary way to do policing or personal defense. Cops don't use pepper spray. Tom and I, in our 50 years, Tom, how many times you use it? Goose egg, right? Never, because it's a pain. You got to deal with it afterwards. So we came up with something we think is the answer for it. Give cops a tool in their belt they can use that's viable. Give people a tool they can use in any environment. You don't have to worry about where you are, like with pepper spray. You can use it in an elevator. You use it in a car. Somebody in a cab is getting stupid with you. Bang, hit them in the face with it. Impact does what you want without doing what you don't want. It doesn't give you respiratory distress. It doesn't cross-contaminate. It's not airborne, water-based, and it cleans up amazingly quickly. Learn more about it. It's for sale, and it's rolling. We're rolling pallets through lately. It's incredible because it's so different and better. CarryImpact.com to order yours. CarryImpact.com. If you're from a law enforcement agency, we're happy to talk with you about getting some samples so you can do some testing. We realize it's a new type of product, but it's amazing what it will do for you. It'll keep your officers safe. They won't have to second guess and think if they can use it. And with that in mind, I want to move on to my partner in crime, Tom, who's going to tell us about my favorite drink.
The official coffee of Gold Shields.
And there was a lot of competition for that. There was a global competition, I'm telling you. At least one company vying for it.
And Bone Frog won. Timmy Cruikshank and his team do an unbelievable job with putting an amazing product out there for everyone. And the best part about it is their mission. Money and the proceeds going to U.S. Navy families, Navy SEAL families. And it's an unbelievable organization, company, and we're proud to be with them and getting sponsored by them. And, Danny drinks it all the time. Unbelievable. Loves it. And bonefrogcoffee.com/goldshields. Promo code Gold Shields. Anything you want on there, get a discount using our Gold Shields promo code. And I wish I drank coffee. I drink it all the time.
In addition to being a great cause and a great guy, great human being who runs it, came up with it, it happens to be the most flavorful coffee I've ever tasted. And I'm a former cop. Tried them all. This stuff is awesome. I'm not just saying that. Awesome. Lastly, before we get to our guest, who we're thrilled to have today, Tom and I are affiliated with the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame, which is having its annual induction ceremony on March 22nd down in Fort Worth, Texas. Some very notable and deserving people will be inducted in this year. The National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame was founded by Megan Stockberger and Adam Davenport as a means of memorializing and commemorating the exceptional work done by the men and women of law enforcement over the course of a career. And everybody else has a Hall of Fame. Why not the men and women who protect us 24/7 around the clock for little money, risking their lives, and who manage to not just do that, but do exceptional things during the course of their career? And that's what the Hall exists for. So, National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame, look them up online, learn more about them. If you're in law enforcement and you know somebody noteworthy, somebody whose career should be memorialized in such a way, let them know, nominate someone, and if you're anywhere near Fort Worth in March, make your way over to this ceremony. You'll be happy you did. You'll see some real heroes. They're always looking for sponsors as well. So if you have an organization or a desire to help this effort to grow this to a national level where it's really reaching where it should, do yourself a favor. Make an investment in the Hall, and National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. Thrilled to be a part of them. But now, without further ado, we're keeping him waiting in the green room, the virtual green room, way too long. Our special guest today. Tom, who do we have?
You know, we're very lucky and thrilled to have this man here. 26-year veteran of the ATF, legendary career, not just in ATF, but in the undercover operations that he ran. Unbelievable. I read, looked at his show, which we'll get into, and what he does. I mean, listen, undercover work is dangerous. Now you're going to hear what goes into it. Lou Valoze, welcome to Gold Shields, and thank you, my friend, for being here, pal.
Hey, thank you guys. And I'd just like to start out by saying that, I'm a huge fan of the NYPD. And, you guys having the long careers you had, I mean, with police departments like NYPD and LAPD, who I was lucky enough to work with a lot, you guys never have a break. It's action all the time, every day. And if you can have a long career like both of you guys had and make it out alive and intact, I mean, it really is saying something. So, I'm big fans of your guys and just want to thank you guys for having incredible careers and doing what you did to keep the city safe.
Very kind to you, Lou. Thank you so much. And right back at you. We're blessed. Tom and I know that. We made it through a real tough time in New York City. Us and a lot of other really good people. We got very lucky and blessed to be surrounded by great people. And it's an honor to have you on because, man, talk about jumping into the fire. Undercover work is dangerous on any level. But some of the stuff I've heard about that you've done, wow. I mean, you got nerves of steel, my friend. So let's dive into a little bit about you, Lou. Where did you grow up? Where are you from? And what led you to this line of work?
I grew up in Albany, New York, and I never had any kind of law enforcement ambition at all. I was kind of I didn't really have any direction. I kind of fumbled my way into college on a football scholarship and barely made it out, but I made it out, and again with no direction. And I took a job working at a bank, making like $8 an hour, sitting in a room with no windows, putting like computer printouts in files. And just, I mean, I was miserable. I was 21 years old. And a guy I played football with, he was down in the Bronx with his brother. And he said, man, you sound miserable. Come on down. Just come hang out. So I drove down one afternoon and we're sitting on the stoop. And I'd never met his brother, didn't know his brother. And this guy pulls up and he's driving a Corvette, right? And this is in the Bronx. He's driving a Corvette. And he gets out and he's got the long hair, kind of, this is Miami Vice days, right? And it's kind of feathered back. And, he's got his shirt open. And he's got a 92F, a Beretta in his waistband. And I'm looking at this guy saying, wow, this is a pretty cool looking dude, man. And it turns out he was a DEA agent and he had just gotten back. He'd been working undercover in South America. So we sat at the table and, he shared a couple beers with me and we talked and, I started asking him questions about what he does. And that was it for me, man. The sky opened up and the lights went off and I was like, man, I can do this. I want to be an undercover agent. But as you guys know, you don't just become an undercover agent, you pay your dues. So what I did was I started taking all the tests for all the alphabet agencies. And the only advantage I had was, most of the guys who are taking the tests for these agencies are guys who are cops, who've, they've been away from the school thing for years. But at least I was fresh out of school. So I was able to score. I just must have had a good day because I'm not smart. I'm not a good test taker, but I got a really high score on what was called the Treasury Enforcement exam at the time. And I got the call because of my score, and they asked me to come out for a job interview in Los Angeles. And I didn't even own a suit. My mom took me down to the garment district in New York to buy a suit. And, I flew out there I tucked all my hair inside my collar and went through the interview with low expectations, right? Because I was totally unqualified. But I think sometimes when you have low expectations, you're not nervous, you know. And next thing I knew, a week later, I got a call and they said, "Hey, pending a background interview, we're going to offer you a job in L.A." And that I kind of fell into it. And then it took me about 8 years once I got on the job. I worked the streets of L.A. In the early 90s when it really was one of the greatest places in the world to be a cop. The gang problem was just, it was blowing up. All these Central American gangs coming in they were beating the shit out of the American gangs, right? They were introducing a level of violence that had never been seen before. They were chopping heads off. They were out of control. So I learned how to be a cop by being on a LAPD task force. And that's where I learned how to work the street and how to be a real cop with those guys. And there really wasn't a lot of opportunity for me at that point, to work undercover. And I wasn't ready yet anyway. So after, moved bouncing around a little bit, about 8 years, I actually landed in Georgia. And just, again, by pure luck, my first partner, he was kind of my training officer, first part, even though I'd already been on for 8 years, I had switched agencies. He was an undercover guy. He was a kind of a legend in the Southeast working undercover. Real crazy dude. One of those guys who just took everything overboard. You know what I mean? If he had to do something to get over, he would go totally like out of bounds and get over, like anti-management, one of those guys. So I loved him. And he taught me the ropes. And I started working undercover the way you should. Nickel and dime street buys. I was buying dime bags, right? And I was buying, little stolen Raven 25 pistol. And I always knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to do those long-term infiltrations. There were guys like Jay Dobbins, who you had on the show, guys like Chris Bayless, who kind of ended up mentoring me, who were doing these long-term infiltrations on the bikers, on the mafia, on the cartels. But before you can jump into that, you got to learn how to be an undercover agent. You got to pay your dues and do the street stuff, which is, to me, like, as I look back on my career, the street stuff is probably the most rewarding and the most dangerous, part of undercover work. And so, I actually kind of got into it very organically, the way you should, by paying your dues and putting years and years in, getting a reputation. And it was actually Jay who gave me the first call. Once he had heard of me and heard about my work ethic, the first call I got was to do a home invasion case out in Arizona that Jay had already been doing for several months. And that's how I broke into it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Learning from one of the best.
Sure.
Learning from one of the best, without a doubt. So you get involved. What was this home invasion? Was it a crew doing home invasions and you guys were infiltrating them?
Bird had already done most of the hard work. And it was one of those crews, and I know you guys have run into them in your careers, one of those crews that was into everything. They were into everything. They were selling pipe bombs. They were selling kilos. They were selling guns. We bought an RPG off these guys. There was nothing they weren't into. And so, Bird had already worked the majority of the case. And when it came to doing the home invasion part, these guys were doing home invasions. Now, most of these home invasions are stash houses. They're dope. And, so Jay told these guys, listen, I got my own crew and I want to bring them in. This is a big job. I want to bring my own crew in. So, this crew said, okay. So there was Jay, there was a guy named Chris Bayless and a guy named John Babyface Carr. And these dudes were already like established. The other, Jay and the other two guys were, these were guys that I wanted to be, I looked up to, and I was kind of the new guy coming in. So, the bad guys, we flew in and we were in roll as the bad guys actually picked us up from the airport in Tucson. And, we were in right away. We were out there for about 2 weeks and we just, we actually bought an RPG. We bought a bunch of kilos and some guns, and we whipped up this whole home invasion scenario. And that takes all the planning, and these guys, that's what they did. So obviously they were well in tune with what we were planning to hit this stash house. And the takedown was incredible. It was out. Jay set it up. It was out in the desert. There were sand dunes. A helicopter came up, and they were beanbagging these guys. It was like a movie. And this was my first. I had been buying, Lawsons in alleyways and in car washes and parking lots, and this was my first intro kind of to the big leagues. And I did almost blow it. I'm sure Jay didn't bring this part up, but I did pay a stripper to punch him in the face, and she actually wadded him up so bad he had to get stitches and the whole deal. So it was my first and almost my last, big time undercover deal. But we were able to patch things up after
that. I would hope so.
Wow. Talk about like kind of baptism by fire, huh? But you know what? You think about how careers happen and how careers start and how they get going. You need that one break. You need that one little, hey, someone recognized what I'm doing or some of the skills I have. And like you said, for someone like Jay to look at you and go, that's what I want. I want him. Come on, kid, let's go. That says a lot about you and Jay actually, having the foresight of what you can, your talents and what you can be, but a lot about you with, the way you worked. Without even knowing your career and just listening to you, you worked your ass off. Absolutely. You can tell you did. And the one thing that really impressed me, Lou, what you said, and you don't see a lot of this in police departments, and Danny and I both went through it. When you get people in certain positions that shouldn't really be there yet, you actually had enough in you to go, you know what? Not yet. Not yet. Let me do this. Let me get to where I want to be. And then saying, okay, now I'm ready. That's rare. That doesn't happen too often. And that's really cool that you had that about yourself, that kind of inner look of yourself. That's cool.
Well, I think what it is it's a selfless act where the job and the work is above your own ego. Because it's easy to accept the assignment to a unit or a place where, look at me, I'm with this. But if you don't know what you're doing there, you're not doing any service to that unit. And the mission is what matters, right? And that means you're in it for the right reasons. So, bravo.
ATF has a lot of issues, as you guys know, right? And I'm sure you've dealt with ATF during your careers, and a lot of guys now. The agency has a lot of issues, and it's certainly had its black eyes, over the last 3 decades. But I will say this: the ATF Enhanced Undercover Program is the greatest undercover program in the world, and it has the greatest undercover agents in the world. And I came in, and I looked up to these guys. I had already been on the streets for 8 years, but when I saw the level of professionalism and the results that they were getting, and I was a fanboy, and that's what I knew what I wanted. But I also knew, just from growing up, with a hardcore father and stuff, you pay your dues, man. Nothing gets handed to you. You got to earn it. And I didn't want to try and jump the gun or try to make a name for myself before I felt I was prepared. And I hope that's the way most people should be, especially in law.
It should be that way, but a lot of times it's not. It's opportunity and advancement, and let me get this as quick as I can without really having the skill set to be where you're at. The one thing I want to ask you, which I didn't have a chance to ask Jay, but I love asking undercovers this. Dan and I worked with a lot of undercovers, narcotics, the gang unit, sources and all that. When you got into your role, was it just your personality that you brought into the role, or did you kind of become someone, or, was there an act involved? We knew so many undercovers that were just themselves, that just went out, did their thing as themselves. And then we also had some that were characters that could come up with these crazy
personas.
Personas, yep, to do. So what was yours?
I was myself, man. I'm not an actor. I'm not a method actor. it would be hard for me to pull off trying to be, someone else. I kept it close to home. I grew up in a very like Italian neighborhood, and I pulled names from neighborhood names as my undercover name, and I just acted like a hustler. I learned a lot from my first partner, who kind of instilled in me that the best way to work undercover is don't look at it as an infiltration, like that you're trying to become one of them. Look at it as you want them to want to become part of your hustle. That's what you want. I'm not going to infiltrate, the Mexican mafia and pretend I'm a Mexican, or, I'm not going to go into some real ethnic, kind of group and try to be one of them. Even when I was down south, I wasn't going to infiltrate the Dixie Mafia and pretend I'm a Southerner, right? It's just my look, and it wasn't happening. So I kept it very close to home. I was always that hustler who I could buy guns and accumulate a bunch of guns, down here in the Southeast, and I could move them up to New York, and I could sell them on the street to my gangster buddies and make a ton of money. And that's gun trafficking, and that really happens. As you guys know from all the guns you guys recovered, I guarantee you all the guns you guys were dealing with and recovering, over half of them came from the Southeast, right? From Georgia, from the Carolinas, and so gun trafficking was a real thing. So I was a gun trafficker, that was basically, a guy from up north, who knew there was a huge profit margin, because it's the truth. I can buy a Lorson down here, a piece of shit Lorson 9mm for $90 or $100, and I could sell it up there as a Glock for $1,500. And it happens all the time, as you guys know. And so that was my hustle. And we took it, we would have the backstopping was incredible. I had moving trucks, and I would show these guys, listen, it would be full of furniture. I'd be like, this is, I'm moving a family from Atlanta to New York. So when I get about 200 guns, what I do, I secrete the guns and I hide them inside their furniture. And then when it gets up there, we get them out before we deliver the furniture. I said, if Johnny Law, sticks their nose on I-95, pulls us over, in worst case scenario, they find the guns, I say, listen, I'm just moving furniture. I don't know, who these people are or why there's guns. And these guys, they were like, right on, man. They got it. We had all sorts of traps, and we had all sorts of shit that made it look real. So we would go really in depth for our cover stories to fit who we said we were.
That's fascinating. You do have to do the background work. You do have to have that credibility, and that credibility comes, because if you're dealing at any given level with criminals, they're going to smell nervousness. They're going to smell rookie mistakes. They're going to smell a story that doesn't make sense. It's got to make sense. It's got to be tested, and it's got to be something that's just a part of who you are naturally to flow out. Because you're right. If you're doing a street corner buy, you can limp down and pretend you got a limp, and you can mess your face up, and you can talk slightly differently for 90 seconds to get a buy and get off the set. But if you're doing undercover work where you're spending time with people, you're developing relationships, you've got to have it be some version of yourself that's yourself. And all that story's got to be worked out. The ID's got to be legit. Things have got to be, you have to imagine criminal organizations have the ability to check you out. So that's all got to look, that's going to look good.
If you're going to say something as simple as, I'm a convicted felon or something, you better damn well know the prison system. You better know the terminology.
Yeah.
Right? Because the guys you're dealing with have been through this prison system. And then when they start asking questions, you better know, or they're going to flush you out right away.
Yep. Where'd you do your time? You say a place they got buddies. You
Absolutely.
may have stepped in deep doo-doo. Right. Yeah. It's all about homework, right? How much homework gets involved? It's a lot of stuff.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yep. Well, I was never an undercover per se, but I did do one operation on a case of mine, and it was actually in Hong Kong. And I did a lot of research to make sure everything I was going to say to those people over there, my DEA partner and I, everything was checked out. I mean, I wasn't leaving anything to chance. From a fake ID down to the story to who I worked for and what I did and who I was associated with, the snitches and what their backgrounds were, everything had to be, I could not stammer for a second.
And along those lines, some of the greatest undercovers with ATF are task force guys, right? They're guys from NYPD, from LA County Sheriff, who come over as task force guys, and they just knock it out of the park. Even better than a lot of the agents,
I think Tom and I can both attest to some of the people that we worked with in the PD and the narcotics side and even the gang side. They could convince you
Yep.
that you were on fire. They could make you sell them anything. They could outstreet you. If you thought you were a tough street guy, they were, it's just amazing. And a lot of them came from those backgrounds, grew up around that, so it was part of them, and they could tap into it in a second. And they knew exactly how to act to stay out of trouble, how to tone a situation down, how to avoid suspicion. So doing any kind of casework, and Tom's team in narcotics did a lot of casework, and I worked at the DEA, and it's like, you got to be good. You got to be convincing. You have to be seen by them as an equal, or like you said, somebody they aspire to hang out with. Like Louis B. we had on the show who did work when I was with Organized Crime Unit. Louis would talk to people because he grew up with mafia. He grew up with them. He almost became one. He could talk to them on their level, and he knew people that they knew. And he'd say, Sally says hi. And that's it. Done. Because he grew up with them. He knew how to talk to people. And he knew what was important to them, and he knew how to get them interested. And a lot of it is keeping a mystery. A lot of it is just, you don't show everything, throwing names around right away.
Bad guys don't
Nobody would do that.
Right? Bad guys don't show their cards, and so it's always a balancing act working undercover. And, everyone has different personalities. So that, a lot of us, we had different styles and different ways of doing it. But the one thing in common is that I think the really good undercovers knew what not to say. You know what I mean? When to keep their mouth shut, what not to say. Like B.B. King once said, like, the greatest guitar player knows when not to play, right? And I always felt that way about undercover work. Have a presence, but don't run your mouth, because the real bad guys that you guys ever dealt with, and all the real bad, they don't run their mouths. They don't tell people their business. So if you go in there running your mouth and pounding your chest, you're not going to last long.
Wow, that's so true. It's so less is more, pretty much, and just know, and that goes into, again, the homework. A lot of people out there think you're an undercover. Okay, let me just go and buy this or do this. There is so much work that goes into an operation like yours. I mean, it's incredible. So speaking of operations, let's get into the storefronts. They are, I saw it on the show, and you're going to talk about your show. Fascinating concept, how it was put together, and take us through that, because I couldn't wait to hear it from you. Like, you watch a show, it's great, but hear it from you of how it came about, the idea, everything about that.
The first thing I'll say is that, we certainly didn't create the storefront, right? And again, that the first really successful storefronts were done by the NYPD. And that was, that's back in the 50s and 60s. And those they were mostly geared toward, fencing and stolen merchandise, that kind of stuff. And they kind of created the template, for these kind of operations. All we did was we kind of took them, and just expanded them and put more into them, more, resources and all that. And what I did was I was able to, the storefronts that I did, I fell into the first one. And again, that wasn't even ATF. Okay, that was the Richmond County Sheriff's Department, they're the police in Augusta, Georgia. They had jammed up a tattoo, a guy who happened to be a tattoo artist. He had tattooed everyone in prison. That was his thing. And they flipped him, and he said, he'll do anything to stay out. And they came up with the idea of doing a tattoo shop as a store. The gang problem in Augusta, Georgia was huge. You think of Augusta, Georgia with the masters and all that shit. It's actually kind of a shithole city, gang infested. So they just needed some undercover work, because they couldn't use their guys, because they were so well known. So I was asked to do it, and I came into it. And I didn't know what to expect, but I never said no. I worked nonstop undercover. If someone asked me to do something, I was doing, no matter what. If I was working 12 hours that day, if I had 4 more hours, I would come help you and do the undercover. So I went out there and not knowing what to expect. And they had set up a great spot, man. It was a real shady looking tattoo shop. ATF came in to help with the setup and all that. And before I knew it, I was the manager of the tattoo shop, and the informant was he was the tattoo artist, and he was a shit show, of course, but he was really good. And he knew all the rap music and all that. And he knew all the different gangs, and he was getting these guys in there to tattoo them. And then it was up to me and the undercovers at that point, to engage in criminal activity with these. And it's spiderweb. We started buying a little bit of dope and a couple guns here and there. We got to know which gangs were which, and we let everyone know this was neutral territory, man, and everyone was welcome. But you guys know how long that shit lasts, right? We had gang wars in there, fist fights, and it was out of control, but we kept it in line. We're really getting harassed by the local cops who didn't know, their one unit didn't tell anyone else, that it was going on. And so we were dealing from all this stuff from the outside. But before I knew it, we had bought 430 crime guns off the streets. And as much dope as we could afford, we had bought. And we had over 100 defendants. It really, I was like, wow, I've been doing all these long-term infiltrations that take 2 or 3 years, and I'm wrapping up 3 or 4 people. I just worked for less than 12 months, and I wrapped up over 100 quality defendants, multi-convicted gangbangers. And I was like, I'm getting a lot of bang for the buck with these operations. And the next thing we knew, we're getting phone calls from people. Hey, we heard what happened in Augusta. Can you do one in my city? And so there was kind of an evolution to these cases, because every one I did, I wanted it to be better than the last one. And so it almost went from, a street level, the tattoo shop was very street level, through the evolutions and the multiple ones that I did, by the end, I was working on international gun traffickers, cartels. We really picked up our game from, driving the old hoopty that I was driving at the tattoo shop, to driving, a brand new Jaguar as a freight forwarder, on my last one. There really was an evolution, and they just kept getting bigger and better. A lot of mistakes were made, but the results were spot on. They're not happening anymore, unfortunately. But what a great tool, what a great investigative tool to help clean up a city or a portion of a city, Yeah.
It's an awesome concept. Rather than going out and chasing the
Bring
criminals,
them to you.
bring them to you.
It's about as safe.
They flock to you.
For undercover work, it's about as safe as you can get. Yeah, it's never safe, as you guys know, with a bad guy with a gun, right? It's never. But at least we controlled the venue, and more importantly, we controlled the electronic surveillance. So it was so nice after we're 12 years of wiring up and wearing all that. It was so nice to not have to do that, because everything was already set, and the quality was always perfect. It was like watching television with the tapes that we were getting. So yeah, it's about as safe and as I guess controlled as an undercover operation can be, a storefront.
So I have a question for you. You got all those cameras set up. You're in there. Cameras are rolling constantly, right? There's got to be a blooper reel. There's got to be something you guys put together of the goofiest moments or the funniest things or whatever. There has to be, all right? I mean, somewhere somebody's watching the funny moments, people slipping and whatever. Whatever it is that happened, because put a bunch of cops or agents together in a room long enough and funny stuff is going to happen. So tell me that
in every
that didn't
case,
happen.
there was a blooper reel that the control room guys and girls would put together, and it was always embarrassing. It usually involved alcohol and bad behavior, and but yes, and those, unfortunately, those moments were kind of few and far between. There was not a lot of downtime on, we were doing 10, 12 deals a day in these things, and the hours were just sick, and after being open for 10 hours or whatever, now you got a couple hours of report writing and logging in evidence and all that shit. So it really, they drained, they were very life draining, doing these operations, then just rolling from one to the next one. They were brutal, but the results we got, man, they were great. And the best part for me was, no matter where we did these, we paired up, with the city police department. And we just got to work with, like, the best people, and we were right there, and we were making a direct impact on the community. That was the best part for me, because it sounds corny, but taking crime guns off the street meant something to me. Buying dope didn't mean much, right? I bought, I don't even know how many hundreds and thousands of kilos over my career, but that doesn't, you guys know that doesn't make a difference, right? That's a drop in the bucket to these cartels. But, one crime gun out of some thug's hand, that makes a difference in the community, and that's really what we were doing, and it meant something.
And that was my next question. Obviously, you're locking the people up for, what they're doing with the guns and selling them and all that. How many times did you get into a conversation with the bad guy about the gun that led to other crimes or other cases getting closed? I mean, they had to have come in and felt somewhat comfortable with you. Perps talk, all right? They talk all the time. So was there even circumstances that other cases got closed because of that gun?
Every single storefront we did, we solved a shitload of robberies and assaults, because these guys would come in on camera and brag about it. And sometimes it would be like the memorable one that just pops up is a guy, super violent dude, who we didn't even enjoy when this guy came in. He was a time bomb. And he came in one time, actually the last time he came in, covered in blood, man. He had a white t-shirt covered in blood. And he told us he had just stabbed a dude, right? He went home, and some guy was banging his girlfriend. And so he took a knife out and he stabbed him. And he came in directly into us right after he did it, and he confessed to the whole thing. And we were just sitting, I was behind the counter, like, why the fuck are you here, man? Like, why do you come here? You're going to bring the heat on us, man. Like, get the fuck out of here, dude. And they were able to get him and use that against him. But yeah, it happened all the time. We had guys they would even tell us, we had guys selling us fentanyl and stuff that was pharmaceutical grade. And they would brag to us how they were doing nighttime burglaries at pharmacies and smashing grabs and taking the shit. And then they would sell it to us. That was something that, there was always in a storefront. We were always concerned with creation of crime, right? We didn't want to create crime, because we had this venue, and, these guys knew we bought guns, we bought dope. We didn't want guys going out and robbing houses and shit, to get guns to come sell it to us. Cause now you're creating, we were trying to buy guns that were already out on the street. So we were always very careful about that. But when these guys would come in, and you guys know how it is, they love bragging, man. And they'll tell you, once they know you're dirty like them, they would just run their mouths, and it would close out, all the cops working in the cover room or the other undercover guys who were cops. They would tape that and they would send it to whatever unit and wrap it up, man. It was beautiful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No Miranda involved in that. No interrogation, no custody. The freely given statement. Yep. In a store run by somebody who's got every right to have the cameras and audio rolling. That's fantastic. That's great to hear. But it's so true about criminals. I mean, especially if you have, there's one thing to be a quiet, sneaky criminal and break into people's houses in the daytime. Those guys that tend to be junkies and they don't talk much. But if you're a crook and a perp and a a gangster kind of guy, you want to brag. And when you get somebody you feel you can brag, now I'm telling you, I'm a tough guy. I'm a big deal. I'm a tough guy. I'm a serious guy. You deal with me this way. And they feel great about themselves when they're telling you about their accomplishments, especially if they're trying to sell you a gun that, I don't know, it might be dirty and it might be hot, but I want to get rid of it, right? What do you mean it might be hot? Well, it might have been used in a shooting. I'm not saying, but, you got to love people who do that. And a lot of it's just bravado and BS, but when you get that real nugget of truth,
beautiful.
that's a home run.
It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. They have the right to remain silent, but not the ability. That's the problem.
For sure.
You say that all the time.
It's true. Yep.
Oh, man. So was there... Go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say, you did the storefronts. How long was the storefront operations, and approximately how many of them did you guys do? Did them all across the country?
So the first one we kicked off, that was kind of the catalyst for these going up all over the country. That was in Georgia, and that one was about 2008. And then they started popping up, and eventually the Undercover program sent me around the country as I was doing my own, sent me around the country to help other agents set up and get them going and make sure, they were doing the right thing. And so I was lucky enough to be able to jump in and do the Undercover and help, other guys and girls out all over the country. I mean, there were some incredible ones that were done on the West Coast, Long Beach and LA and Vegas, Albuquerque. I mean, I went all over the country, and I would just basically, I had to write a report that went back to the Undercover program that said, yeah, they're checking all the boxes and all that. But in reality, I would go out there and I would jump in and help these guys or girls out with the Undercover, just as a partner. And I loved it, man. It was great. Unfortunately, like everything good, there's a window. Congress got very sideways with these operations, and they probably about 2016 or 17, right about when I retired. They just ATF. They were getting heat from Congress, and they just said, "Oh, we're done," and that was it. So now the storefront's like a dirty word. If you go to a U.S. attorney's office or a district attorney's office and say storefront, they'll show you the door. It's a dirty word now.
Yeah. Well, there's always political pressure behind all of that. When politics get involved in law enforcement, I think your agency, the ATF, is the highlight example of that recently. Other three letters, but we had a thing in the NYPD back when Tom's dad was with the department called the Stakeout Squad. Now, at the time, crime was completely out of control in New York City, and the department, being unlike what police departments are today, was very practical in certain ways. Like, we'll address crime, we'll meet force with overwhelming force. They had such a problem with robberies of businesses to the point where they set up what's called the Stakeout Squad, and two-man teams, plain clothes, shotguns, handguns, would go and sit in the back of certain stores in neighborhoods where a lot of robberies were going on. And they got to the point where they killed so many people robbing stores, they had to shut it down. It got to be like ridiculous because, but whose fault is that? Is it the police department's fault that people are robbing stores at gunpoint? No, but I think they had, you had some Vietnam vets that came back and they were like, yep, I'm okay with killing. And they put them in the back of stores and they were like, boom, blowing people left and right out of their socks who were coming in and not listening to the order to put the gun down. Well, that's more a statement of what's going on in society than it is a statement about policing. But nonetheless, police department was told, dial it down, don't do it anymore. We're not going to be killing people.
To me, what you just described sounds like a great solution to a really bad problem.
You should think, if you're going to rob a store with a weapon, and we, Tom and I both saw this working in neighborhoods with a lot of bodegas. I don't know, there's a bodega in Manhattan or the Bronx or Brooklyn doesn't have a gun behind the counter. And I kind of don't blame them. They get robbed all the time. But with an 18-year-old kid with a Raven 25 stolen, you mentioned that before, they're so common on the street. walks into a store to rob a bodega, if he thinks he's going to get shot by a guy with a 50 caliber or something, Desert Eagle, whatever, a 44 Magnum behind the counter, he's probably not going to go in and rob that bodega. He's going to find someplace else to rob. You make yourself a hard target, and you send a message, and the criminal community, they all talk. They all know. Don't even think about doing that because you'll get killed. That's it. And so they go someplace else for their money. It is a deterrent. And we speak in terms of, when it comes to crime deterrence and all this kind of stuff and the public's appetite, we speak in terms of like we're talking with regular people. Die-hard criminals, career criminals, these people would slit your throat as soon as talk to you. They would step over your dead body to get to something that's your property. These are not the kind of people that you can have these nice, safe approaches with. They just don't respond to it. They respond to force and force alone. And when you hang out with criminals long enough, you realize that. And it's a shame to see how certain political moves have gone that have been they were so easy on it now. It's ridiculous. And it's a free-for-all. We're seeing it in our cities, right?
We're doomed. I hate it. You know, the big thing with, the storefronts, of course, with Congress eventually became the whole racial thing, right? And my argument, and what I wish ATF would have stood up and argued this was, we're not putting these places up just like haphazardly. We're not closing our eyes and sticking a pin in the map and putting up the storefront. We were doing it through analytics, right? We were compiling okay, listen, this area of the Bronx, here's the gun crime statistics, gun recoveries, right? Armed robberies, right? We're compiling all the statistics, and we were only opening up storefronts where there was bad gun problems. So if all the defendants happen to be of one race, so be it, because that's where the gun problem is. That means all the victims are all the good people in that community, right? Who make up the majority of that community, and they're good people, and they're the victims, right? What about the victims? They wanted to shut these down, using the whole selective prosecution thing. And my argument was always, listen, we're trying to help the community. That's the whole reason for a storefront, is to make that community safe. And that's what we were doing, because we're getting the trigger pulled. So, I never heard that shit when I was if I did a outlaw motorcycle gang, right? And all the defendants were white. I never heard any complaints or any selective prosecution being brought up by the defense. So it's got to work both ways. We're doing this to help that community. And none of us, as you guys know, as cops, I didn't care if they were all Chinese, if they were all Irish, Puerto Rican. It doesn't matter to me. Shitheads are shitheads. And that's who we're going at.
I never discriminated. I could care less what you look like. I cared about what you did.
And we've said it so many times on the show, Dan, and it gets nauseating saying it, but once again, when politics gets involved in law enforcement, things go wrong. And things don't proceed the way they should because of that political realm. And it happens all the time. There's not one instance, one example that politics gets involved in law enforcement and it works. Never. And who suffers? Communities suffer. Communities where crimes are happening and murders are happening and robberies are happening, that's who suffers over that nonsense.
Actually, there's one outlier to that, and that's when Giuliani became mayor of New York, and his politics came in and he said, we're going to take the city back. That was the one example that's different, I think, in recent history. But you're right. Other than that, it's always to appease a certain group or a certain agenda. And what happens is cops get told, don't do A, don't do B, don't look at A. And you got to be, law enforcement has to be colorblind. It has to be situational. This person did this. He's getting locked up. Period. Person blew a red light. He's getting a ticket.
I found throughout my career that all the people you saw who were like out there on the news grandstanding and saying, the law enforcement is doing this, and all, they never cared about the victim. They never mentioned the victim. Let's boo-hoo and let's cry about this armed robber who's being unjustly, persecuted. But they would never mention the victim. What about the victims? And that's why we're really out there, to help the victims of violent crimes, man. it gets lost somewhere. It gets lost. And unfortunately, our agencies and our departments, sometimes they bow to the pressure. Almost always they bow to the pressure, and they just shut all these good things down. You know, all the great programs that the NYPD had installed, and that ATF and LAPD, you know, all these great programs we started that were very effective. The departments just kind of bend over when there's a little pushback from some fringe group. And then who, like you just said, who pays the price?
You know, the ATF, not to gloss over this, you had a mandate that was broad enough to allow you to work in a lot of different cases. Almost any kind of crime that popped up across your radar, you didn't have to hand it off. You did it. So people don't think ATF agents are out there buying drugs in under capacity. You are. They don't think you're accepting stolen goods as part of a storefront, but you are. Whereas a DEA agent might not get involved in a certain case. They stay strictly on the drugs and money laundering and things that go with it. But you guys had a broad mandate, and that's kind of, you know, we did in the NYPD too. If you work in the narcotics division, you're supposed to do drug cases. But if part of it is a stolen credit card ring, we're running with it. Or part of it is this or that, is a homicide. You know, the other units get involved, but you don't stop. I love that about the ATF. You guys are the cowboys that just follow the crime, and guns are involved in all of it. So you hang your hat on that. There's no such thing as a criminal organization that protects its assets and its domains and all that stuff without guns.
Weapons are the tools of the trade. And, you know, I was lucky. You know, we had a very long leash, very long. And once we got into something, you know, my last storefront operation, we took down the biggest stolen car operation on the East Coast. It was, of course, it was out of New York. And they were bringing the cars down, and they were titling them in South Carolina, and then they were shipping them out of the ports of Georgia and Florida to South America. And the greatest part about that part of the operation was that the FBI had been on to this stolen car ring for like 2 or 3 years, but of course nothing was happening. And we worked these guys, indicted, arrested, and convicted them. And the FBI didn't find out about it until it was in the papers, which that was one of the most satisfying days of my career. But yeah, you know, for example, I don't mean to shit on the FBI, but they deserve it. You know, if an FBI agent has a case in New York, and, you know, all of a sudden, you know, that case takes him to Toledo, Ohio, you know, that's the next step. They're done. They have to forward the 312s or whatever to Toledo, and then some agent who knows nothing about it in Toledo has to pick it up and run with it. You know, the great thing about ATF is, if my case started in Atlanta, you know, and it took me to, you know, Grand Rapids, Michigan, you know, my ass was on a plane. I'm going up there, and I'm going to run with it. You know, like, so we had a lot of leeway, and you used the term cowboys, and we really were. I mean, we had such a crew, and we were really making a difference, and we were putting violent criminals behind bars. We had a great run. You know, with this, we still have some great men and women in the Undercover program, and they're still doing as much as they can. But as you guys know, all law enforcement across the board, they're not doing what we did a decade ago. And that, not because of them, but because of the climate today.
Right. So with all that being said, how does the legendary 26-year career of Lou Valoze come to an end?
It was
how, why?
Yeah, like a dumpster fire, man. You know, I barely crawled over the finish line. I had started working on regular cases, like just regular undercover cases, you know, maybe 3-4 month undercover cases. And I'm doing that in between storefront operations. And then if I'm getting a call from a buddy in Chicago, hey, we need you on this, you know, could you do this? We got a mafia case up here. We got guns or whatever. Can you come up here? Absolutely. And I'm doing that. And I'm on weekends going back to something else. So I had definitely become a little bit obsessed with what I was doing and kind of buying into, the whole persona, to the detriment of definitely of my personal life, my family, my friends, and all that. So once you go down that road, and you're in the undercover business, it's a house of cards, and that card's going to get pulled eventually. I guess the only comforting thing I can say about it is that I wasn't the only one. I looked to my right and left, and these guys were doing the same bullshit that I was doing. Excessive drinking, not exactly being good family, fathers and husbands and all that. But you don't realize it when you're in it, right? I can look back now and see it, but when you're in it, the only thing that mattered was the next case, right? My next case had to be bigger and better. And, I look at like, hey man, Dobbins just, he just took down a crew in Phoenix, and he got, he seized 100 guns, had 25 defendants. And even though I was happy for him, I was like, well, I'm going to outdo that. I'm going to get 27 guns and 101 defendants, right? We had that healthy competition that all cops had, right? And Jay always says this, and it's true. We're always, all of us, the first to give everyone else credit and to tell everyone how great the other guys are. But deep down, we all believed that we were the best, right? And again, this was for work. It was kind of a healthy thing, but it led to, I think it definitely me and a lot of my brothers and sisters, down an unhealthy road. And so for me in particular, it led to just excessive drinking, never being home, unfortunately infidelity, and by the and that was at that point that was just part of the job, right? I mean, that was just part of it, and all the I was locking people up, so none of that other shit really mattered, right? Because I was doing God's work in my mind, and by the end, it all kind of came to a head in this last big operation, which to me and to many people, it was the greatest storefront operation that's ever been conducted. Like I said before, I was a freight forwarder. The crew around me, they were just incredible, and we were getting into Bolivian gun smugglers, that stolen car ring, just cartels, the Sinaloa cartel, but along with that, when you're experiencing all that success, there's always, how we are as cops, right? The bad behavior always kind of goes along with the success, right? And when it all came to a head, there were some allegations, like there always are in every long-term operation, allegations of bad behavior and improprieties and all that. And again, I love what Jay says. I'm going to go back to what Jay always says. We always took the law very seriously, the laws, but we took ATF policy and procedure as mere suggestions, right? That's just how we did it. Because in order to be successful, that's how you had to. And in that last operation, it all kind of came to a head. And when accusations started flying around and people start doing this, it came out with me in particular about an affair with the federal prosecutor on the case. And that blew up my whole world. And it blew up my career, obviously. And I found myself under investigation. And I found myself for the first time in my life, and how we are, we're A personalities, right? Type A, and we're always in control of everything. I found myself, I wasn't in control of anything. I was no longer in control. I couldn't control the investigation on me. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have any answers. And it broke me down. It really broke me down. So I kind of crashed professionally and I crashed personally. The U.S. Attorney's Office, incredibly vindictive. I certainly wasn't the first agent or cop, to, have something with a coworker or a prosecutor or whatever. But they maybe it's because it was down here and it was kind of a good old boy network down here, and she wasn't very popular because of that. They came after me hard, all sorts of accusations, and I didn't know what to do. ATF got me out of the hot seat. They put me in at the National Center for Explosives and Training Research in Alabama, in Huntsville, just kind of get me out of the hot seat. And it actually came to the point where the United States Attorney's Office sent me a target letter. You guys know what a target letter is federally? Yeah, that's when it said United States of America versus Lou Valoze. And after being a cop for a quarter century, to look at that, to read that, I can't even tell you the feeling. I'd given my life, everything, to this cause and to the government, and to see how quick they turned around on me. Instead of kind of pulling me aside and saying, hey, let's, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Tell us what, they came after me, and tried to put a case on me. And they use what they always do when they really don't have anything. As you guys know, when law enforcement doesn't really have anything, they always go for false statements, right? That's the catch-all, right? That's what got Martha Stewart. They didn't get her for cheating on her taxes. They got her for making a false statement in the interview. So they started investigating me, and, they went way out of the scope, right? They're interviewing people from 10 years ago on these undercover cases I did. What they were trying to do was they were looking at my testimony in court and trying to find inconsistencies. So I would have guys calling me up saying, hey, this was like a tech guy who would place cameras in one of my operations. He'd say, man, I just got interviewed by OIG, and they're asking me if I remember exactly where I put the camera, because during your testimony, you had said that it was in this spot, and they wanted to see if maybe it wasn't in that spot. That's how, they don't put this much effort into a murder case, right? And so I was like, that's another thing that sent me spinning out of control, because, I know these people, right? I've been a part of this system, and I know when they really want to get someone, they're going to get them on something, no matter what. And so that's another thing that just made me spin out of control. So meanwhile, I'm dealing with all this professionally, worried about my pension, worried about my insurance and my kids, my marriage. And I really don't have anyone, I can't really turn to my wife at this point. And, the only people that I had to turn to were my brothers and sisters in the Undercover program, who stood by me, and everyone I ever worked with stood by me. But it's a hard thing when you're, as you guys know, when you're in the mix and you're working your cases, and those phones are ringing off the hook, and you're right. You got informants calling you, you got bad guys calling you, you got your boss, all that. My phone went silent overnight. Done. No, the phones were done. Nobody was calling, and so everything happened at once, and it was overwhelming to not be in control. And so at that point, I knew I was never going to work undercover again. Obviously, no one at that point is going to put me up on the stand. And the shit had hit the internet, it had hit the papers. And I knew deep down I hadn't done anything wrong. And even one of my partners got pulled aside by a guy who was the head of IA for ATF. And he said, listen, we looked at everything. Lou didn't do anything wrong. We're not the morality police, with the other thing. He said, but we can't do anything to help, because once OIG takes over, it's out of our hands. So what I basically did at that point, was make a decision that the most important thing in my life was to give my family. Right. You know, there's been some serious neglect on my part, and I had to get my family back. So as soon as the investigation was over, which was 2 years, as soon as it was over and I was cleared and there was no allegations against me, everything was found to be good and I was cleared. At that point, I retired. And that's when I kind of, I had already started, to win back the trust, of my family. And, you can never make up for that time you lose with your kids, but I did everything I could to, from that point on to be there and kind of start building my life back together. And that's kind of how the whole book thing came out. A buddy of mine who was a cop here in Savannah said, man, write a book. Just do it for a mental health thing. And, that's how all that started. And I kind of got this second career going here.
What a story. Thank you very much. I know our audience got a lot of that. You're not the first person we've had on the show, and far from the first that we know, including ourselves, that have had trials and things that you go through, hitting that brick wall in life. And in law enforcement, you've been doing it long enough, when you turn around and realize that you have given so much of your life to an organization and a profession that would replace your locker and your desk in 5 minutes, and you look at your kids and your family and go, I should be home more instead of working overtime and getting on planes and stuff. At least you had that realization. It wasn't one you came to on your own, right? It was kind of thrust upon you, but at least you had it. And wow, a compelling story. I'm glad that you are on the other side of it now, and you're able to share your story. And thank you for being as candid as you have been. And I just want to, we love the concept of people being open about, especially those of us who've done this kind of work, and your work has been even more intense in many ways as an undercover, deep undercover. But if you've done this kind of work and you need help, get it. Reach out for it. Ask for it. Don't sit around thinking it's going to get better on its own. It doesn't. And you need people. And we tend to isolate, right? We tend to turn to ourselves and we say, I got this. Me and the bottle, we got this. No, you don't. You might have it that night, but it's not the way to go. We want to see lives turned around and renewed and restored, because it's a rough thing to go through a career in law enforcement. Doing it at the level that you did, man, I'm just really happy, and I'm proud to call you a friend now. And I want to thank you for sharing that story. And I want people who are listening, if you get any kind of struggles like that with life, no, you can come out on the other side of it, and you will eventually. But lean on people. Lean on your faith, lean on, professionals. Do what you have to do, but
That's
don't
right.
do it alone.
I do a lot of speaking at law enforcement conferences all over the country. And I always close with, I tell these, because I look out, you can look out when you got a group of 700 cops, you can feel the stress, right? And the anxiety, the strain in the room. These are usually gang conferences or, and I'm looking out and the kind of life these guys are living, the life that you guys live, right? It's nonstop. It's all the time. And, the point I always try to get across, I tell my story, what happened to me. And, I don't cover anything up. I'm not proud of a lot of it, but it is what it is. And I always say, listen, at the end, when you're on your death, who's going to be there, right? The New York City Police Department's not going to be there holding your hand, right? Or ATF's not going to be there when you're on your deathbed. The people around you when you go home, that's who's going to be there by your side. So that has to be your priority. It has to, no matter how important the case you're working on right now is. It's not more important than your wife, husband, kids, best friends, those mom and dad, those around you. That we lose sight of that because we're doing God's work, and we lose sight of that more than any other profession. We lose sight of it. No, you wouldn't understand, right? All that, but I tell everyone, I say, don't lose sight of what's most important in your life and who's going to be there, because the most important thing to you should be your pension. That should be the most important thing. And that you have to live a long, healthy life so that you can collect the pension that you're owed for years and decades. That's the most important thing. I mean, go to work and work your ass off and do your job and make the community safer, but make damn sure you go home at night and tell everyone you love. That's what's mostly important.
Amen.
Yeah,
Amen.
I lost sight of that for years and years, and like Dan, like you said, it didn't just all of a sudden open up. I had to get punched in the face for that to hit me, but thank God I did, right? And it did hit me. So, I hope when I talk to people, when I talk to our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, and they hear my story and I tell them that, I hope that message is getting through. I really do.
Yeah. Well, very, very powerful, very powerfully shared. Thank you. What do you have going on? What do you want to tell the audience about that you have going on that we want them to hear and see and learn about your stories, experience, and the things that you're doing, which are fascinating? So please tell us what you got going on, Lou.
Yeah. So I, through the book, and I wasn't really looking for this. I had already had my little, after being invisible for decades, all of a sudden, my name was in the paper and on the internet. So, I had already had my little brush with the press, and it wasn't very good. So I certainly wasn't looking for any more. But when the book came out, or as it was coming out, this guy who owned South Magazine, his name's Michael Brooks, and he approached me and said, "Man, I would love to do your story. It's a regional magazine, great magazine down here, Georgia, Carolinas, Florida." And he said, "Man, I want to put you on the cover and just tell your story." And I told him, I was like, I said, "No, I've already been in the papers, and it didn't work out very well." But eventually, he talked me into it, and I did it. And kind of through that, I started getting phone calls from like reality shows, producers, asking me if I'd be interested in doing this or that. And most of them were really goofy and, kind of would have made me look like a clown a little bit. I thought, so I didn't want to do it until I had some producers say, "Listen, we want to make a show highlighting the great work that police departments do all over the country, with kind of an undercover angle. Would you be interested in hosting something like that?" And I said, "Yes, I would. I would." I said, "This was Discovery Channel, and, they historically, they portray law enforcement in a positive light. And these producers, particularly, very law enforcement supported." So, now from that conversation to the time that we actually got a show was 4 years. And that's how TV land works. Nothing happens fast. It is the most aggravating business. I've never met people who I don't even, I know you guys are workers like me. These people are in Hollywood are unbelievable. You'll get a call from them in October and they'll say, "Listen, this is great. We're on it. Holidays are coming up, so nothing's really going to happen. We'll call you in January." And I'm like, what the hell kind of business is this? Are you kidding me? But eventually we got it all worked out. So that became Operation Undercover, which is on Investigation Discovery, which is Discovery Channel's, premier network. And it's also on Max, which was HBO Max. Now it's Max and Discovery Plus. And so we did the first episode, and that was with, they never said this on the show, but that chief of police was my old partner, my first partner that I told you guys. And he was up in South Carolina, and the ratings were off the charts. I mean, it worked out, that's how they do it. They'll film one, they give you the money to film one, and they put it on, and they gauge, they have all these focus groups come in and they watch it, and all true crime people and all that. And so, if it's a big thumbs up, they give you a full season, right? If it's mediocre or thumbs down, that's it. You're one you're a one-hit wonder. Luckily, the show, thanks to the producers, no thanks to me, thanks to the producers, the show came out incredible. I don't know if you guys have been able to see it, but it came out really good. And so they gave us a full season. We start filming in April. So if there's anybody listening right now, and any cops who have a department, you guys have done any kind of undercover cases in the last few years that worked out well, please reach out to me. We'd love to feature you. The success of the show, and I'm hoping this is going to be a long-term thing, it's only going to be as good as, the departments that are willing to work with us. I'm not it's not about me. We're featuring great police departments doing great work. That's what it's about. That's why I love it. So I got that going on. We start filming again in April. And the other thing is, actually a big Hollywood company bought my book. They bought my life rights, and they are going to make a Netflix type series out of these storefront operations. It's going to be called Storefront. And, each season will be a different storefront with different actors, because I had different agents and cops in and out. And the actor, John Bernthal, who's the Punisher, who's an incredible actor, he's on board with it. And so we're going through everything now to see, what network it's going to be on. And we got a great writer named Matthew Carnahan, who, if you Google him, he's done incredible stuff. He did that great show with Don Cheadle, called, House of Lies, I believe it was. It was incredible. And, he's the writer for the show. So he's taking my book and he's making it into a series, like a Netflix series. So hopefully, again, this has been going on for years. Nothing happens fast, man. Nothing. So I got those two things going, and I guess I could tell you guys this: there is zero work or opportunity for a retired undercover agent in the private sector. It does not translate over to the private sector at all, man. It's hard enough as a former cop, I think to get a job. But if you specialize in undercover work, there's no use for that in the private sector. I found that out real quick. So it's kind of worked out that, this is all happening for me.
Could not be more happy for you. Couldn't happen to a more deserving person. That's fantastic news. And, John Bernthal taking that role. I mean, I was offered it. I turned it down. That's why awesome. He grabbed it. But right. Yeah, I was busy that weekend. I had stuff going on. So your first partner, the undercover thing, Operation Undercover, wouldn't happen to have been Keith Groundsel, would it?
No. His name was Randy Beach. He was an Augusta cop, so he was a real cop, and he came on to ATF, and he was in the narcotics unit. He was doing undercover, and man, he hit the ground running when he came on to ATF, and I was so lucky to end up with him at the beginning. And again, his techniques were somewhat bizarre, but he taught me really how to work undercover from the ground up. And not this movie shit, but the down and dirty undercover 101, which is where you really have to start if you're ever going to get, to the big leagues, to the J. Dobbins League. You got to start out 101, and Bird did too. Bird started out in back alley deals and all that. Like, that's the way to do it. Those are the building blocks, to work your way up. Again, my first biker case, they threw me in, and I didn't know shit about undercover bikers. I knew nothing about that whole culture, but I had several years with Randy learning how to be undercover. And so I was able to at least bullshit my way just because I had those building blocks in that base. And I was able to succeed. And it was interesting in the show, in Operation Undercover, they don't ever disclose that, Randy was ATF or he was my partner. He's just the chief of police in this small city in South Carolina. But it just worked, man. It worked really good. So again, I'm looking for departments. I would love to have NYPD. Looking for departments. Just all we want to do is highlight the great work that's being done, because it is still being done out there. Not as much as when we were doing it, but the guys are still doing what they can do, and we want to show it.
So we're working on that for you. Yeah. So thank you for everything. For your time, first of all. Secondly, for your incredible career in service. How many people are alive because of weapons that you and your team and the men and women like you took off the streets through one way, shape, or form or another, whether it be a storefront or a search warrant or a buy and bust or whatever it was? You guys took a lot of weapons off. That's your focus. Yes, that's where the violence is. They use the weapons. It's part of the job. It's part of the career of a criminal. So thank you for doing that and for risking yourself and for giving so much of yourself to a career, and for dealing with everything you had to deal with as a result of that, and for coming out on the other side of it, so willing to share your story. People need to hear these stories of going through the kind of things you went through, coming out of it on the other side wiser and ready to move on with the next step, next phases of your life, which are outstanding, and we couldn't be more bigger supporters of. We will let all our audience know whenever something's coming out with you. We'll keep them in touch with that. And we just appreciate you so much, have so much respect for you. Thank you for coming on today and for honoring us with your time.
Hey, listen, Dan and Tom, I would love to come back. After the first season, we're going to film it all in a row from April, May, and June. I'd love to come back, and I'd like to close out and say again, I'm a huge fan of the NYPD, and like I said, anyone who can go through, a 20, 30, 35-year career and come out, and I mean, it's an accomplishment in itself, because it's one of those places where, there's no down days, there's no time off. I mean, you're on every day because it's always happening. And I just have such great respect for you guys, and God bless you. And I would like to say one thing. There is one of my brothers, ATF Agent Carlos Valles, Valles. He was paralyzed a couple months ago. He was doing an undercover deal in New Orleans. He was on the 3rd floor in the projects, and he ended up, there was about 9 guys. One of them had an AK-47 pointed at his face, so he didn't have a lot of options. He jumped off the balcony, landed on his head, and severed his spine. And he's in Miami right now at a spinal center. And I'll give you guys the information before for his. I know Tunnels to Towers is now working with him to get him a smart home. But if anyone would care to, there's merchandise you can buy to help him out and stuff. I'll give you guys the information by the time this airs. And I love Carlos, and one of the greatest agents. He's a young guy. He's 40 years old, and he's got a tough road ahead of him. But it's a great cause to help a brother out. Put that out.
Absolutely. We'll share that, and we will send prayers and all the best, and anything we can do for him and his family, consider it done. He's your brother. He's our brother. Gosh, that's just a terrible story, but it's something that could happen to any of us at any time in that line of work. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Lou. Thank you. So, as we always do, Tom will take us out at this time. We will have you back, Lou. If you're willing to come back, we will have you back at any time. And we want to always make sure our audience is up to speed on what you're involved in. Tom, take it away, brother. You always take us out with such panache.
Incredible show. I mean, again, we're blessed all the time. We say it endlessly after each show every week. We're blessed with the guests that we have, and to have a back-to-back with Jay and Lou now, it's just it's awesome. It's so good, and we're thrilled. And like we always do, say thank you to a cop. And if this episode shows that, this job is not easy. Not one part of it is easy. The physical part, the mental part that goes with it. And when you can just be out there and say thank you to a cop and pat him on the back, and give them a wave, it means everything to them. Because listen, when you do that, you don't know the day they're having. You don't know what's going on. And if something bad's going on, then they look up and see someone wave to them, it means everything in the world to them. So just continue to do that. That's our big message on this show. Say thank you to a cop. And as well as the military as well. They're always in our hearts and in our prayers because they go through the same stuff. Like we do at the end, subscribe to our show on youtube.com/@goldshields, rumble.com/goldshields. Check the video shows out, and we're on every audio channel you can imagine. Follow us, and we love the support. Thank you so much for everyone that's doing that. Numbers, Dan and I don't pay a lot of attention to it, but we've been looking lately, and they're just off the chart. And we don't do it. It's not us. It's our guests and you listening and watching. So thank you so much. For Lou Valoze, thank you again. My partner, Dan Murphy. This is Tom Smith. Everyone out there, stay safe, and we will see everybody soon.